One of my favorite ways to create some really deep multi-textured modulation effects in Logic is to use the MIDI to plugin parameters preset in the scripter plugin. This allows you to pair any MIDI continuous controller with up to 4 different targets. So these targets can be any knob or fader control within any plugin, both effects plugins and software instruments. So this gives you real-time control for your sound design, and you can also control multiple parameters with a single controller. So first I'll click Learn MIDI Input, and then I'll just move a knob or fader on my MIDI controller, and it learns that CC. So this is CC21, which is the first knob on my MIDI controller. So I have the vintage Mellotron pulled up here. And let's say that I want to control the blend knob, but simultaneously control the tone knob. The MIDI to plugin parameters preset makes this super easy. All you have to do is go to your output targets, choose Learn Plugin Parameter for target 1, move the knob or fader that you want to control, and you'll see that it's learned the vintage Mellotron layer blend. Next, I'll go to target 2, click Learn Plugin Parameter, and move the tone knob. And you can do this for up to 4 different parameters. So now that I have my controls learned, I can control both of these with a single knob on my MIDI controller. But let's say that I wanted one of the controls to be inverted. Well, it's very simple to do. All you have to do is go over to the scripter plugin and invert the minimum and maximum values. And you'll see now that when the blend goes up, the tone goes down. And when the blend goes down, the tone goes up. You can also limit the depth of the modulation. So if I want my blend knob to stay toward the middle, I can set these minimum and maximum sliders, and the modulation will never go to 100%. Now let's say that I wanted to add a third control like this Valhalla Shimmer plugin here for some nice ambient reverb. So what I'll do is I'll click on target 3, go to Learn Plugin Parameter, and then click the Mix knob in Valhalla Shimmer. So now I'm controlling all 3 of these parameters with a single knob. However, I don't want the reverb to be so drastic. I don't want to go from no reverb to all reverb. So what I'll do is I'll limit the range of the wet-dry knob in Valhalla Shimmer, similar to how I did with the blend knob. And like I said before, you can add up to 4 different targets for each controller. So here I'm also controlling the depth of the tremolo plugin to give this a bit of motion. So I have a new software instrument pulled up. It's just a Steinway Grand Piano preset. I've got it running through the tape delay, and then I also have it running through the stereo delay. Now, the only thing I really want from the tape delay is the feedback knob, and then I'm just using the stereo delay for a bit of rhythmic motion between the left and right channels. So what I'll do is I'll go up to Learn MIDI Input. I'll assign the third knob on my MIDI controller, which is CC23, and then I'll assign this to the feedback knob. So now I can control the feedback with the third knob on my MIDI controller. However, I don't want this to go all the way up to 600%. That's too much. I want this to be around 130, 140% at its maximum value. So I'm going to pull down the max slider here a bit. I'll start with about 60%. Let's see what that does. Yeah, so 130%, that's just fine. I want to be able to pull this up and get a nice feedback effect. But then be able to pull it back a bit to keep that feedback loop from spiraling out of control. Next, I have Space Designer pulled up for a bit of ambience, and I want to be able to control the dry and wet sliders here. So for target 2, I'll learn the dry slider, and then for target 3, I'll learn the wet slider. Now the problem here is both of these are moving up and down at the same time. As the feedback increases, I want more of the wet signal and less of the dry signal. So what I'm going to do is invert the dry signal. So now that when I pull this up, I get more wet signal. So more feedback, more wet signal. Pull it down, I get more of the dry signal. But the other thing is I don't want the wet and dry signal to be going to 100% or 0%. So I'm going to narrow the range here for both of these so I don't get quite as drastic of an effect. So I really like this effect because I can play a chord or a note, and then I can slowly roll up the modulation amount, and I get more of that feedback loop and more ambience, and it sort of extends the tail of the chord or note that I'm playing. Now, if you want to record these controls, they just get saved as region-based automation. So I can record each of these instruments individually, or if I wanted to, I could actually combine them together in a track stack. So I'll add these to a summing stack. So if I show the region automation here, you'll see that all three of those controllers show up as automation data. I can go in and I can manually edit them with my mouse if I want, or I can record them in individually.